just back in June of 2024, in the deep waters off the coast of Israel, researchers found a shipwreck unlike anything they'd ever seen before. It's from the late Bronze Age, dating back more than 3,300 years. That alone is rare, but what makes this discovery even more unusual is where it was found, nearly a mile beneath the surface, resting upright on the seafloor like it never even tipped. The ship still carried its cargo, hundreds of clay jars, sealed tight, possibly with oil or wine. There were no bones, there was no signs of a fire, just this vessel from another time, perfectly preserved in the cold dark. It's believed to be the oldest deep-sea shipwreck ever found, and the fact that it was out in open water, not close to shore, means that these ancient Canaanites may have been long-distance seafarers, something history hadn't confirmed until now. The site feels untouched, almost too untouched. For how long this ship's been sitting down there, it's in pretty good condition. Just this wooden ghost alone in the black depths of the water. Not far off Italy's western coast, under the blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea, sits the ruins of what appears to be a Nabatean temple. It shouldn't be there. The Nabateans, known for building Petra in present-day Jordan, were desert people. Traders, yes, but builders of temples in Italy? That wasn't part of the story until this discovery in 2023. At first, researchers thought it might be Roman. After all, there are plenty of Roman ruins along the coast, but when they took a closer look at the architecture, they realized it didn't match the Roman style at all. In fact, some inscriptions pointed east, back toward the Nabateans' homeland. The remnants of this place looked a lot like one of their temples. It was just sitting in the wrong place. There had been local legends of a drowned shrine off the coast, but no one knew exactly what it was. Some think it could have been sunk by an earthquake, which isn't usual in this area, but there's no record of the temple anywhere. It's not in any Roman texts, there's no mention of it in any ancient accounts. It was lost to history. The biggest question of all, though, is why did the Nabateans build a temple this far from home? Back in 2020, off Australia's northwest coast, archaeologists found something unexpected beneath the ocean. In places that are now completely submerged, they discovered ancient Aboriginal stone tools, hearths, and signs of long-lost camps. These sites are at least 8,500 years old, maybe even older. That means people once lived here, cooked their food here, made tools here, on land that hasn't been dry since the last ice age. Sea levels rose slowly, swallowing the coastline bit by bit. The people moved inland, but the sites they left behind stayed where they were, preserved under layers of salt water and silt. The tools are simple stone blades, flakes, a grinding platform, but they're unmistakably human. Aboriginal groups have stories that go way back about rising waters, and now we've got the evidence to back that up. These aren't just old artifacts, they're part of a bigger story, one that's been passed down for generations. There's probably way more out there too, other ancient sites just waiting to be discovered. Every new find adds another layer to the history of people who knew this land and the sea way better than we ever realized. On the island of Abaco in the Bahamas, there's a deep circular pool known as Sawmill Sink. It looks calm from above, but under the surface, it drops into complete darkness. Divers exploring it have found the remains of animals that no longer exist. Giant tortoises, an extinct species of crocodile, and birds that haven't flown for thousands of years. Some of the bones still have soft tissue on them too. That's how untouched this place is. But it's not just animals. In 2004, divers found the nearly complete skeleton of a young woman. She lived over 1,000 years ago. Her body had sunk into the sinkhole and was preserved almost perfectly, sealed in the still, oxygen-poor water. Her bones told stories about her diet, her life, her people. She's one of the oldest intact human remains found in the Caribbean. Just north of Dublin, along Port Marnock Beach, the ocean's been giving up some secrets, literally. After a big storm in 2024, locals noticed something strange poking out of the sand. At first glance, it looked like old driftwood, but no, this was a shipwreck. Not just a piece of it either, pretty much the whole thing, at least the shape of it anyway, which had been buried for who knows how long. Turns out, this wasn't the first time the beach had coughed up pieces of a ship, but this time, it got the attention of Ireland's National Monuments Service, and they came out to investigate. They already knew about that particular wreck from a few years ago, but while they were out there, they also found 3 more shipwrecks hidden just beneath the sand. These wrecks are believed to be from the 1800s, maybe even older. They're made from thick wooden beams held together with old school iron bolts, and even though the wood's rotted and soaked in salt, the craftsmanship still holds up. This stretch of coast is actually a bit of a ship graveyard. Around 50 wrecks have been recorded in the area, from centuries-old trading ships to coal boats. Most of them were just unlucky, caught in bad weather with no one around to help and no one left to tell the story. And because of shifting sands and powerful tides, these wrecks come and go. Sometimes they're visible, sometimes the beach just swallows them right back up. In 2012, divers working off the coast near the Croatian island of Ilovik found what turned out to be a part of a Roman cavalry helmet, submerged and buried in sand for centuries. It was found in a relatively shallow patch of sea not far from where other Roman-era items had washed up. This particular helmet fragment, heavily corroded but still identifiable, wasn't part of some grand archaeological dig. It was actually found by a recreational diver who later turned it over to authorities. What makes this interesting is the context. The area was part of a Roman naval route. Ilovik sits in the Adriatic, not far from ancient Roman settlements along the Dalmatian coast. This helmet, likely dating back to the 1st or 2nd century, may have belonged to a Roman soldier who went down with his ship, or it was lost during transport. Unlike the overhyped treasures of the deep, this artifact is simple, just a piece of someone's life, someone who probably didn't think, or at least want to think, that they'd end up at the bottom of the sea. In 2007, a team of researchers scanning Lake Michigan's floor made a strange discovery. They weren't really looking for anything, they were just mapping out the lake bed, but then they saw it. This circle of stones arranged deliberately, sitting 40 feet underwater. It looked like something out of Europe, something old. One of the stones even had what appeared to be a mastodon carved into it. The site hasn't been explored much since then, which is surprising. The waters are pretty murky, though, which makes it more challenging. Skeptics were pretty quick to dismiss this, saying it was just rocks that settled naturally, but the pattern, the symmetry, and the fact that one of the stones has an ancient mastodon carved into it, yeah, it definitely seems like there's more to this site than just a series of rocks. If it really is ancient, older than Stonehenge, it would change what we know about prehistoric people in North America. It would mean someone was building monuments here before written history, before cities, before anything we recognize. Off the western coast of Cuba, in waters over 2,000 feet deep, sonar scans revealed something that shouldn't be there. Massive symmetrical structures, straight lines, right angles, pyramids, or what really look like pyramids. It was first discovered in the early 2000s by a Canadian research team. They were expecting to find shipwrecks. Instead, they found what some would call an underwater city. The layout seems to suggest streets and plazas and buildings spread out over several square miles, but here's the problem. The site is so deep that if it really is man-made, it would have been at least 10,000 years old. That's before any known advanced civilization, before Egypt, before Sumer, even before the supposed rise of organized society as we know it. Some scientists are pretty skeptical, saying it's just a natural rock formations, but the shapes are unusually geometric, too clean, and there's no clear geological explanation for how they ended up arranged like that. The site hasn't been fully explored. Deep sea dives are expensive, and the Cuban government hasn't prioritized any further investigation here, so whatever's down there is just sitting and waiting. Just off the coast of southern Greece lies the ruins of Pavlopetri, a city that's now entirely underwater. You can still see the streets, the building foundations and tombs, all laid out clearly on the seafloor. It's over 5,000 years old, one of the oldest submerged cities ever found. Pavlopetri wasn't destroyed by war or fire, it just sank slowly, piece by piece, after a series of earthquakes and rising sea levels. What's left is incredibly well preserved. No one ever built over it. No scavengers took the stone. It's just there, untouched under the waves. Divers have mapped out more than 15 buildings here. Some still have dividing walls, some even had plumbing. People lived their entire lives here, close to the sea that eventually claimed it. Pavlopetri matches descriptions from ancient texts about cities swallowed by water. Some even link it loosely to the Atlantis myth. That's a stretch, sure, but when you see how complete the ruins are, it's hard not to wonder how many other cities might be submerged out there. Near the island of Bimini in the Bahamas, there's a line of these huge stone blocks resting on the seafloor. They stretch out in a near straight path for hundreds of feet, like a broken causeway leading into the deep. Some call it Bimini Road, others say it's part of something much older. The stones look placed, not random. Each one is rectangular, some over 10 feet long, and they fit together in a way that doesn't seem natural. Divers first found them in the 1960s, and ever since people have been arguing about what they are. Geologists say it's just a natural formation caused by erosion and fracturing, but the layout does feel deliberate. Some believe it's a remnant of an ancient harbor, or again, maybe even part of the lost city of Atlantis. And that's not just because it looks like the remains of a part of a city that's now underwater. See, Bimini Road sits very near where a supposed clairvoyant predicted that Atlantis would be found. A man named Edgar Cayce, who died in 1945. So that little detail has just helped fuel the rumors. But was Bimini Road actually a road, or does it just really happen to look like one? Perhaps. We'll never really know. Pavlopetri is ancient, about 5,000 years old, making it the oldest submerged city we know of. Sitting in Vatica Bay off the coast of southern Laconia in Greece, it's believed to have been submerged around 1000 BCE, mostly thanks to a series of earthquakes and rising sea levels. But the cool part is, it's almost completely preserved under the water, with streets, buildings, and even tombs still clearly visible. You can make out a lot of the city's layout. Pavlopetri has been mapped out using modern technology like sonar, and archaeologists have been able to identify at least 15 buildings, some with multiple rooms. The town was home to a pretty sophisticated society. It was involved in trade, and the ruins even show evidence of different social classes, with fancy tombs for the elites and simpler graves for all the regular folks. Pavlopetri's history goes back even further than we first thought, too. Originally, it was thought to be from the Mycenaean period, around 1600 to 1100 BCE, but later studies pushed it to around 3500 BCE. After being submerged, it's been left mostly undisturbed. It's one of the most well-preserved ancient cities that we know of. At one time, Thonis Heraklion was one of Egypt's most important port cities, found at the mouth of the Nile Delta. It was a major hub for trade and religion, and a link between Egypt and the Mediterranean. It was also home to some seriously impressive temples, including one dedicated to the god Amun. But by the 8th century, the city had disappeared. The exact reasons why it sank are still up for debate, but it's clear that the city was lost to the sea. Eventually, it became a bit of a myth. But then in 2000, an underwater archaeologist named Frank Gaudio came across something while searching for the lost city of Alexandria. What he found were these massive statues, ancient ships, and sunken temples. The city had been buried under about 10 meters of water, perfectly preserved. It was the lost city of Thonis Heraklion, and ever since, there have been more excavations revealing more of the city's layout. There are streets, docks, and residential areas. This place was also a center of culture and religion. The artifacts discovered there, including a giant stone relief of a pharaoh and a huge statue of the god Hapi, show how important this place was in its prime. Off the coast of Gujarat in India, divers started exploring near modern-day Dwarka in 1983. The project was run by India's National Institute of Oceanography. What they found underwater were massive stone blocks, walls, and what looked like sections of a city grid. Some of the ruins were sitting about 30 feet below the surface. The layout looked intentional. There were right angles, straight lines, even areas that looked like they might have been docks or buildings. This matched up with the stories from ancient Indian texts that talked about a city called Dwarka, said to be ruled by the god Krishna. Now, according to the text, the city was built on the coast and was later swallowed by the sea. That sounded like a myth for a long time, until the underwater ruins turned up. Carbon dating and other tests on pottery and construction materials found that the site showed that some parts of it could be more than 3,000 years old. Some Indian archaeologists think this could actually be the original Dwarka mentioned in the Mahabharata. Back in the late 1600s, Port Royal was one of the biggest and wildest cities in the Caribbean. It was a major hub for trade, but it was also known for its pirates, its brothels and bars. Some called it the wickedest city on Earth. It sat right at the mouth of Kingston Harbor, and at its peak, it had thousands of people and dozens of ships coming in and out regularly. But then on June 7th of 1692, a massive earthquake hit. The ground basically liquefied under the city, buildings collapsed, and in minutes, about 2/3 of Port Royal sank straight into the sea. Over 2,000 people died, and what was left was later hit by fires and hurricanes. After that, the city just never really recovered. In the 50s and again in the 80s, underwater archaeologists started exploring the sunken part of Port Royal, found streets, foundations, even some personal items like dishes and tools and weapons, still sitting where people left them when the quake hit. Xicheng, also called the Lion City, wasn't lost in some freak disaster or anything. It was sunk on purpose. In 1959, the Chinese government flooded the area to make way for the Xicheng River hydroelectric project. The city, which had been sitting there for over 1,300 years, ended up at the bottom of what's now Qingdao Lake, about 40 meters underwater. The city is still mostly intact though. You've got these ornate carvings, stonework, arches, and roads that haven't really eroded like you'd expect. Divers exploring the ruins found walls, towers, and gates that date back to the Ming and Qing dynasties. Xicheng wasn't a small town either. It played a big role in the region's politics and economy at the time. Because the water's cold though, and low in oxygen, decay has been super slow. Today, the place is basically a time capsule. Not many people know about it unless they're into diving or Chinese history, but it's one of the most well-preserved underwater cities on the planet. Yam is one of the oldest underwater settlements we've ever found. It's sitting just off the coast of Israel, under about 10 meters of water, and it's been down there for around 9,000 years. The place was around during the Neolithic era, long before the pyramids or even writing. Back in the 80s and 90s, marine archaeologists started surveying the area and realized there was more than just a few old rocks down there. What they came across were actual houses, stone walls, and even a well. One of the biggest finds was this really interesting looking stone circle. Some believe it might have been used for healing or ceremonies, kind of like a prehistoric underwater Stonehenge. They also found human skeletons, tools, and signs that people here knew how to farm, fish, and live in permanent settlements. One of the stranger discoveries were traces of tuberculosis in the remains, making this one of the oldest known cases of that disease. As for why this city ended up underwater, most experts think a massive tsunami hit triggered by a volcano or a landslide. The timing does line up with a major collapse of the continental shelf in the Mediterranean. Canopus was an ancient Egyptian city near Alexandria. It was a pretty important place. A lot of trade went on here. It was also known for its temples, like one dedicated to Osiris. For a time, this city really flourished, maybe a little too well though, especially during Roman rule. It was rich and luxurious, and people really started embracing the excess. It was so over the top that writers like Seneca and Juvenal called it out for how debaucherous it was. Seneca was a Roman philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero, and Juvenal was a poet who made a career out of calling out all the messed up stuff that went on in Roman society. But by the 2nd century BCE, things started to fall apart here. Earthquakes, rising sea levels, and tsunamis slowly sank the city. The eastern side of Canopus got swallowed by the sea, and the western part became the modern town of Abu Qir. It was nearly forgotten until 1933, when a British pilot spotted some ruins in the water. That led to some archaeological digs, but it wasn't until the 90s that underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team started uncovering the submerged city. What they found were columns, statues, and temples still sitting down there under the water. Dunwich used to be a decent-sized town on England's east coast. Back in the 11th and 12th centuries, it had busy docks, there were several churches, there was steady trade, and it had a relatively large population. It was a well-connected place, doing business with parts of Europe, and even had its own mint at one point. But starting in the 1200s, storms and coastal erosion started eating away at the land. A huge storm in 1286 wrecked the harbor, and over the next few hundred years, more storms and rising sea levels kept chipping away at what was left. So most of the original town is now underwater. Today there's only a small village on land, but some will say that you could still hear the sound of church bells rising up from the water. Baiae was basically ancient Rome's party town. It sat on the coast of the Bay of Naples and was the place where the rich and powerful went to relax. And they did other stuff that can no longer be spoken of here on YouTube. Emperors like Nero and Hadrian had villas here, and the town was packed with bathhouses, temples, and fancy estates. It had natural hot springs as well, which made it a popular spot for Roman elites looking to soak and unwind. But there was a shady side to it as well. Some ancient writers described it as a place full of scandal and corruption and political plotting. It was kind of like Vegas for senators. The town eventually declined when the Roman Empire fell, and between volcanic activity and rising sea levels, a good chunk of the place ended up underwater. Today, parts of it are still on land, but a lot of it, the whole villas, statues, mosaics, and roads, are now sitting beneath the sea. It's one of the only places in the world where you can actually snorkel or dive through this ancient Roman city. You'll see things like marble floors, collapsed columns, and the remains of Hadrian's villa. Pretty amazing, and I think adding this one to my bucket list. Curon was a small mountain village in northern Italy near the Austrian border, but in 1950 it got completely wiped off the map on purpose. The Italian government flooded the area to merge two natural lakes into one big artificial reservoir as part of a hydroelectric dam project. Over 160 homes, farms, and buildings were lost underwater. The villagers were forced to relocate, of course, and everything they left behind was buried beneath the lake. All except for one thing: the church tower. That single stone bell tower still sticks up out of the water today. In winter, when the lake freezes, you can actually walk right up to it. Locals say you can still sometimes hear the bells ringing, even though they were removed before the flooding. It's eerie, kind of beautiful. The image of the tower became iconic. It's even the inspiration for the Netflix show Curon, which has that tower sticking out of the water as the promo image. You can see why. It's definitely eye-catching. The cenotes in the Yucatan Peninsula were super important to the Maya. These water-filled sinkholes weren't just places to get fresh water, they were seen as gateways to the underworld. For the Maya, they were more than just natural wonders. Guillermo de Anda, a specialist from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, said these cenotes were, quote, the main scenario of the myth of creation for the Maya. And these cenotes really are like a hidden world. Above the surface, they look like beautiful spots with crystal clear water, lush vegetation, and massive stalactites. But underwater, these cenotes lead to massive labyrinths of underwater caves, some of which are still mostly unexplored. People practiced rituals here. Offerings, altars, even bones have been discovered deep inside, giving us a look at how crucial these places were to Mayan life. One of the most famous cave systems is Sac-Actun. It's the largest underwater cave in the world, believed to connect to other cave systems, possibly making the whole network over 1,000 kilometers, or just over 620 miles long. Inside these caves, explorers have found Mayan artifacts, animal remains, and even evidence of human sacrifices. The cenotes and caves of the Yucatan could completely change how we understand the early Maya, with some of the discoveries hinting at settlements and rituals long before the rise of the classic Maya civilization. In the spring of 2017, divers Sam Meacham and Fred Davos squeezed their way through a tight passageway, only 28 inches wide, deep in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. After swimming for half a mile, they finally reached what they couldn't believe was in front of them: a 11,000-year-old ochre mine, untouched and almost perfectly preserved. The site, named Iliamna, was a time capsule. There were pits, broken stalactites used as hammers, and even old charcoal from fires. Early humans have been extracting red ochre pigment, which was later used in everything from cave paintings to mortuary rituals. Archaeologist Brandy MacDonald had been studying ochre for years and said this discovery was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The discovery gave the researchers a rare look into how some of the first people in the Americas lived, long before the rise of the Mayan civilization. Scientists also found remains of early humans, most famously the remains of a girl they named Naya. who fell to her death around 13,000 years before. The question was, why had she gone so deep into the caves? As Roberto Junco from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History stated, what the hell were they going down there for? This wasn't an isolated site. Radiocarbon dating revealed at least 2 other ochre mines in the area dating back between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. This shows that early humans had a sophisticated knowledge of their environment, with well-planned mining expeditions that lasted thousands of years. It's still a bit of a mystery as to why they went so deep into these caves, but there's a strong possibility that they weren't just used for practical reasons, they may have been spiritual too. The ochre they were mining was obviously important, often used in rituals. Holly Moyes, an expert on cave rituals, talked about how caves in early human history were often seen as sacred spaces, saying caves produced all kinds of good and evil, adding that the deep dark environments were perfect for rituals. For the Maya and other Mesoamerican cultures, ochre was sacred, possibly seen as a way to connect with the underworld. The Hoyo Negro, or Black Hole, is one of the most mysterious underwater caves in Mexico, and for good reason. Found once again in the Yucatan Peninsula, this place is kind of a time capsule. Scientists have discovered some really unexpected treasures here. When divers first explored it, they found an almost perfectly preserved set of remains belonging to a human who would have lived around 13,000 years ago, one of the earliest inhabitants of the Americas. The bones were also found along the remnants of extinct animals like mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed tigers. If you're into shipwrecks, the Black Sea is like an underwater treasure chest. In 2015, a team of researchers made one of the most incredible finds in the region, an ancient Greek shipwreck, over 2,000 years old. What's amazing about these shipwrecks is how well preserved they often are. Because the Black Sea has a layer of anoxic, oxygen-free water deep down, anything that sinks below this layer doesn't really rot. It's like a giant underwater freezer. The wrecks, including the famous Greek merchant ship, are almost perfectly preserved. The shipwreck, discovered in 2015, was found at about 2,000 meters, or around 6,561 feet deep, and it was in incredible condition. The hull, the timbers, even the steering mechanism were all there. It was a huge discovery, being that it's so rare to find ancient wrecks in such good shape. This isn't the first or last wreck discovered here. There are dozens more, stretching back to the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans. The biggest question on everyone's mind now is what other surprises are sitting deep in the depths of the Black Sea? Could there be other sunken cities or undiscovered shipwrecks hiding down there? Well, the more researchers dive into the Black Sea, the more they find we've only scratched the surface. Now, this one's got a real mystery vibe about it. The Cave of the Swimmers, found in Egypt's Sahara Desert, doesn't seem like something that should be on this list. I mean, we are talking about underwater discoveries, but hear me out. Inside this cave, you'll find a series of ancient paintings on the walls, and some of them seem to depict people swimming. Something that doesn't quite add up. Why would ancient cave paintings show people swimming in the middle of the desert? I'm sure the Sahara hasn't always been a desert, but it has been for about 2 to 3 million years. These paintings, though, are only estimated to be around 10,000 years old, but they seem to show people swimming. So could there have once been a river or lake in the area that we just don't know about? The Cave of the Swimmers is famous for these unusual paintings that seem to suggest there was some kind of large body of water right where the desert is now. Lake Titicaca is a massive high-altitude lake between Bolivia and Peru. It's already famous for being one of the highest navigable lakes in the world, but here's where it gets really interesting. There's a submerged temple underneath it. Divers have found ruins in the lake that some believe could be connected to the ancient Tiwanaku civilization, a culture that existed in the Andes before the rise of the Inca. But the thing is, no one really knows how these structures ended up underwater. Some researchers believe that these temples were part of an ancient city, maybe even built to align with the stars or the movements of the sun, which was really important for Andean cultures. The theory is that Lake Titicaca could have been much lower in the far past, and that over time it flooded, swallowing parts of the city. Another thing that's really cool about these remains is that the stones used to build them aren't like any other stones found in the area. Definitely odd. Could this submerged site be part of a larger, forgotten civilization? Divers are still trying to map out just how far this site extends, beneath the water. Now this one's really out there. Lake Baikal in Siberia is not only one of the oldest and deepest lakes in the world, but it's also a place where people claim to have found signs of an underwater alien base. The story goes that divers in the lake have reported seeing strange geometric shapes and metallic objects deep underwater. Some have even said they've seen alien beings. Some of these objects allegedly seem a little too perfectly shaped to be natural, and there are rumors that these objects could be remnants of a super advanced civilization, possibly even extraterrestrial, or that there's a currently existing alien base deep under the water. There have been reports of mysterious structures and strange energy fields being detected deep under the lake. Of course, it's said that these reports have been leaked by whistleblowers who have been told to stay quiet. What's really going on here? Are there just odd but natural rock formations, or is there something stranger going on? Lake Baikal is remote and deep enough that it could make for a pretty good place for a group of alien researchers to park their ships. Next up, we have the underwater cave beneath Paganica Bay in Croatia, which is not a recommended dive. The place is known for being incredibly dangerous. 4 people have died here between 2002 and 2015 on 3 separate occasions. In 2002, a diver was found dead 177 feet down in a cave wearing a dive suit but had no mask on. There was also a 12-inch blade sticking out of his chest. Now at first this seemed like a clear-cut case of foul play. 2 suspects were even arrested, but after they looked more into the diver's last dive profile from his dive computer, the cave's dimensions and other forensic evidence, it became clear that he'd likely taken his own life. It seemed that the diver, known only as MK, had gone in alone, got lost, and ran out of oxygen. As he began to drown, he found an air pocket, but knowing he wouldn't have enough air to make it back, he chose to go out quickly rather than suffer a slow, terrifying death from drowning. The apex predator of the sea? Well, apparently yes. Back in 2003, scientists tagged this massive great white shark. They were studying temperature changes in the ocean. Well, several months passed, and the researchers found the shark's tag washed up on shore in Australia. They took a look at the tag's information, which revealed that about 4 months after they had tagged the shark, it had suddenly plunged 1,900 feet below. There was also a sudden spike in the shark's temperature, so it looked like something had attacked the shark and dragged it down before, putting it in its mouth. So the question was, what the hell had managed to attack and consume a 9-foot great white shark? Now, there are rare cases of cannibal great whites, and there are great white sharks that are much larger than 9 feet, so that was a possibility. Again, that's rare though. Great whites usually don't attack one another. Another possibility is that something else attacked the shark. Something else that we'd never want to run into.
Next up, we've got eggs and active volcanoes. In July of 2022, marine researchers decided to explore an ancient deep-sea volcano off Canada's Pacific coastline. And what they found was pretty cool. First of all, they discovered that the 3,600-foot tall volcano, 1,100 meters, was actually still active. And second of all, that it was covered in around 1 million eggs the size of American footballs. What kind of eggs? Skate eggs. And no, I'm not referring to a hockey player's breakfast, but rather a little-known sea creature closely related to sharks and rays. The specific skates on the volcano are Pacific white skates, and they're super cool to look at. These creatures, along with many others living around the volcano, are able to survive and thrive because of the warm, nutrient-rich waters produced by the active volcano. The mystery here is how the hell this thing has stayed active for so long. How did we not know about it until now, and what else is out there? I bet James has some answers.
1968 was not a good year to be in a submarine. That year, 4 subs vanished, all within a relatively short time frame. The subs were the Israeli INS Dakar, the French Minerva, the Soviets K-129, and finally, America's USS Scorpion. Now, we don't know exactly what happened to these submarines, but this was the Cold War, so there's a good chance the fate of the US and Soviet subs had something to do with that. The Israeli sub ceased communication on January 25th of that year though, and the wreckage wasn't found until 1999. And just 2 days after the Israeli sub had originally gone missing, the Minerva vanished in the waters off Toulon in southern France. It was just an hour away from port, and this one wasn't found until 2019.
Next up, we've got the mysterious methane leak of the deep blue sea. Doesn't sound ominous or damning at all. Not. In August of 2022, researchers discovered that a massive amount of methane was bubbling up from the bottom of the deepest point in the Baltic Sea. You know, where the Baltic Sea anomaly that may or may not be an alien spaceship lies. But I digress. The team in charge of monitoring the methane reported that it was, and I quote, basically bubbling everywhere, covering an area of roughly 7.7 square miles or 20 square kilometers, which is around 4,000 soccer fields. And it's all happening at a depth of about 1,300 feet or 400 meters. Whole lot of numbers going on here. Anyways, researchers believe that the methane is coming from a large amount of decaying organic matter lying on the sea floor. But like, there's a lot of methane, so at this point in time they aren't 100% sure. And they also have absolutely no clue as to why it is rising so high up. So it looks like we've got a mystery on our hands.
Back in 2015, the EV Nautilus, a San Pedro-based research vessel, discovered something pretty insane in the Gulf of Mexico, an incredibly deadly underwater lake 3,300 feet below the surface. It's this pit of high salinity water and dissolved methane, and anything that goes too close doesn't make it out alive. They just get pickled. The underwater lake formed millions of years ago when the area was much shallower and covered in salt beds left behind by evaporating water. Over time, these salt layers got buried under sediments, and the pressure caused cracks, allowing oil, gas, and super salty brine to seep out. This brine is so salty and dense that it doesn't mix well with the surrounding seawater. Instead, it forms its own underwater lakes, rivers, and even waterfalls. And around the edges of this brine pool, mussels really thrive actually. They cling to the mineral deposits, and these mussels have a special relationship with bacteria that live on their gills. The bacteria use gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide, which seep from the ocean floor to produce energy for the mussels. Now, while the mussels can live near the brine pool, the brine itself is extremely toxic to most sea life. It contains very little oxygen and high levels of harmful chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and methane. Any fish or sea creature that ventures into the brine is quickly killed and preserved by the super salty water, which is 4 times saltier than the surrounding ocean. It's really cool. You look at images of this place and there's all these like crabs that have been sitting there for like who knows how long. It's like a graveyard.
Next up, we've got the world's loneliest fish, aka the deepest dwelling fish, which just so happens to look incredibly cool. The species, believed to be an unknown species of snailfish, was discovered in April of last year, 2023. Scientists were able to capture video of the fish feeding in the Izu Ugasawara Trench near Japan at a depth of 27,349 feet. It was a groundbreaking discovery for marine researchers who up until then had only ever seen fish at a depth of about 500 feet above where this species was found. So how the heck do these fish survive at a depth packing such immense pressure that it would cause you and I to crumple up like a shiny ball of tinfoil? Well, I'll tell you. Snailfish are incredibly adaptive, so adaptive in fact that they have replaced their scales with a gelatinous layer that helps to absorb the pressure. And their chemical makeup has adapted to protect their cells from the pressure as well, so they're pretty much set. But it begs the question of whether or not we find an even deeper fish with even more gelatinous bits next year. Here's hoping.
Can't do a deep sea mystery video without mentioning at least one shipwreck, and this one is very intriguing because it seemed like there was some sort of bad energy attached to it. In the Gulf of Mexico, once again, there's a shipwreck that seems to bring nothing but bad luck to anyone who tries to explore it. ExxonMobil discovered this wreck while laying down a pipeline, and that was the last bit of good fortune they had near the site. When a team was put together to check out the wreck, everything started going wrong. Their exploration submarine malfunctioned just as it was about to dive. Problems ranged from video monitors failing every time they turned on the thrusters to the sonar breaking down and the hydraulics going crazy, one after another. Then the Navy got involved and sent their own research submarine. This sub had its own set of issues as well. It pretty much destroyed its own rover as soon as it hit the water, and when it finally reached the wreck, its robotic arms were too short to grab anything of use, and these are just a few examples of the long list of failed attempts to explore the wreck. It seems like anyone who tries to get close to it is doomed to fail in some bizarre or frustrating way.
Next up, we have some unusual behaviors being displayed by a new mother. In June of 2022, marine researchers witnessed something they had never seen before while tracking a female squid who had just given birth in the waters of Monterey Bay, California. The mama squid was observed carrying her babies. Why is this strange? Well, because up until now, squids have only ever been observed abandoning their babies. Not in a CPS way though, it's just not in their nature to care for their young. And it has always been believed that once a squid lays its eggs, it leaves them to develop on their own. But of course, now there is video evidence proving that that is not always the case. Scientists observing the behavior speculated that maybe the mother was spooked, perhaps by the remotely controlled rover used to observe her, and she felt as though she needed to take extra precaution to ensure the safety of her offspring. But at the end of the day, they didn't ask her, so we really don't know the answer.
We've all heard about the legend of Atlantis. Well, Japan may have an Atlantis of its very own, Yonaguni Monument. This mysterious structure was discovered in 1986 by diver Kihachiro Aretake off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. It's been heavily debated as to whether this place was naturally forming or not ever since. It's located about 60 feet beneath the ocean's surface. The monument consists of these massive stone blocks arranged in a way that really does look like it was done deliberately. You see what look like terraces and steps, all these columns and walls. The main structure is something that almost looks like a pyramid. This was why it's known as the Yonaguni Monument. And ever since these formations were first discovered, there's been this idea floating around, no pun intended, that the Yonaguni Monument is part of the remnants of a sunken city belonging to some prehistoric advanced civilization, like the lost continent of Mu, for example, dating back around 10,000 years. Mu's existence has never been 100% verified, and it's kind of in the same vein as Atlantis or Lemuria, but folks like university professor and researcher Masaki Kimura believe that the precision and arrangement of the stone blocks go far beyond what could occur naturally, and that these formations are likely from an ancient human settlement now submerged beneath the waves. But there are plenty of skeptics on the other side who say that it's all just formed naturally. They argue that the formations are more likely a result of some tectonic activity, erosion. People are just looking too deeply into it. Pareidolia, you know, we look at things we don't understand and we go, oh, that looks like a house or a column of some kind, stairs. Well, I don't know. Personally, I look at these photos and I don't know, those look like stairs to me. But what do you guys all think?
And finally, to finish us off today, we have the mystery that is, how the hell are animals able to survive and actually thrive on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, aka the GPGP? In 2018, while studying debris collected from what is essentially a floating island made of garbage, two scientists noticed something strange. Very tiny marine animals including crabs and anemones, animals that are normally seen on beaches and along the coast. So how the heck did they end up all the way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? No one actually knows. As a general rule of thumb, the open ocean is not at all a suitable environment for small animals such as crabs and anemones because there is not a lot of shelter to help them defend against predators. But now, all of a sudden, it seems as though these small animals have found shelter in our old bottle caps and chip bags. But again, how did they get there? Because surely these animals would not have been able to swim all the way out into the open ocean and then all the way up to the garbage patch. And yet it appears as though a whole new thriving ecosystem does very much exist there. Of course, it's possible that these animals latched onto the plastic when it first entered the ocean and then held on for months as it journeyed out to the GPGP, but again, that doesn't really line up with previously observed behaviors. Really, the whole thing is just one big what's going on to science and scientists.
Number 10. Lost submersible. A frantic search was underway for a submersible that disappeared while on a $250,000 per person dive, carrying 5 tourists to view the historic Titanic shipwreck. The 21-foot submarine named the Titan, which was operated with a video game controller, carried the CEO of the company in charge and 4 passengers when it lost contact off the coast of Cape Cod. Passengers only had a 96-hour supply of oxygen that had depleted to just 40 hours hours since the harrowing journey began. Now, as I am filming this, some pieces of the Titan have been found and all aboard are presumed dead. Now, there are many different outcomes that could have happened. The best case scenario is that it imploded from all the pressure, meaning the people on board died almost instantly, and the worst case scenario is they were alive for all 96 hours, knowing they were lost and running out of oxygen as the air became thick. Then they all died hyper aware of everything and died slowly. Now, it's unknown how or why the equipment failed or what even happened. They could have been caught on something, but without help, it seems like their fate was set from the beginning. Rescuers are still looking for more of the submersible, and if we do find it, we can hopefully discover why and how this happened. Now, all I'm saying is I really think they got the best immersive Titanic experience ever, so I don't think they should be mad about it. Number 9. Elongated skulls. Saqueum is a cenote located in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It's a place that the locals feared, and in 2012, a team of divers discovered the reason behind its fearsome reputation. An underwater survey discovered 2 chambers of the cenote littered with human bones, including deformed skulls. Archaeologists spent 2 weeks exploring the 2 chambers, and the skulls belong to all different sexes and ages, so they aren't thought to be as sacrifices. Which then begs the question, what are they doing buried deep underwater? Archaeologist Bradley Russell, who made the discovery, believes the dead may have been buried as some form of ritual, or that they could be the victims of a plague that swept through the area. You wouldn't want them near the rest of the population, and you wouldn't want to drink the water either, Russell explained. Regardless, that's creepy, and why are the skulls even elongated? Are they another species of human? I just have so many questions. Number 8. The Baltic Sea anomaly. In 2011, a sonar image was taken by Peter Lindenberg, Dennis Aberg, and their Swedish ocean diving team for searching for treasure on the ocean floor in the Baltic Sea. What the picture showed was a seemingly non-natural 200-foot circular object with passageways and stairs. The discovery looked like something out of a Star Wars film, and many people believed it was a spaceship that sank to the bottom of the ocean. Samples taken from the area in 2012 were given to Swedish scientists who said there was nothing extraterrestrial about the area, but I'm not too sure about that. What Ocean X and the crew found was weird, and many still think there is a UFO lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, and there's another expedition of the area planned soon. So maybe we'll see. Number 7. The monster of Lake Iliamna. Lake Iliamna is a lake in southwest Alaska at the north end of the Alaska Peninsula. It shares a name with the Iliamna River, which flows into it. It's the largest in Alaska, 3rd largest lake in the entirety of the United States. Now, local residents have a number of stories about the alleged Iliamna lake monster, an unknown aquatic creature. Speculation exists that reported sightings may be undocumented population of white sturgeon, which is a type of fish. If true, this would be the most northerly population known to exist, just a few hundred miles from the Arctic Circle. Jeremy Wade, presenter of Animal Planet's River Monsters, is among those who speculate these sightings of a monster is a white sturgeon. Others believe it's a Pacific sleeper shark, and evidence of this is corroborated by a 2012 YouTube video that shows a smaller Pacific sleeper shark in the lake, and there were several new sightings in 2017, and the Anchorage Daily News once offered a prize of $100,000 for concrete proof of its existence. Number 6. Unexplained sounds. Yes, there are several unexplained noises that have been recorded over the years, but 2 of the most popular being the bloop and Julia. Now, the name bloop sounds cute, but it's not. The bloop was actually an ultra-low frequency, high-amplitude underwater sound. Detected by the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in 1997, the sound was loud, unprecedented, and eerie. Explanations offered included covert underwater military exercises, whales, giant squids, or a totally unknown sea creature. However, it seems glaciers were once again the culprit, with the sound judged to be consistent with ice calving, where large chunks of ice break off a glacier. But I'd like to believe it's something more sinister, even though that scares me a lot. Number 5. The Yonaguni Monument. Are they man-made steps and ancient pyramids that sank in an earthquake, or natural rock formations? These strange structures in the water off the coast of Japan, nicknamed Japan's Atlantis, have baffled scientists since they were found. The sea off Yonaguni is a popular diving location during the winter months because of its large population of hammerhead sharks. In 1986, while looking for a good place to observe the sharks, the director of Yonggi Tourism Association noticed some singular seabed formations resembling architecture natural structures. Amazingly, scientists are still arguing if people or Mother Nature created the Yonaguni Monument, as well as whether markings in the stone are carvings of faces and animals or simply naturally made scratches. Today, it's a popular dive spot with tourists today and continues to puzzle people as one of the ancient mysteries researchers still can't explain. Number 4. Giant underwater pyramids is an anomaly that experts have been unable to fully understand or explain. Picked up by oceanic GPS technology, measurements of a structure were found, leading researchers to believe that 2 giant pyramids of ancient times sit underwater thousands of feet below the surface. The GPS data received back that the structures had a base of 8,000 square feet and were about 150 feet tall, making these pyramids pretty giant in size. But there's very little explanation into their existence, leaving it all entirely up to speculation. Why would they be there? Is it another hidden city? Who knows? The pyramid has been underwater for about 20,000 years. Considering this is around the time of the last ice age where glaciation was melting from its peak 2,000 years prior, whatever civilization, human or not, that was around before the ice age could be responsible for building the pyramid. While the Portuguese Navy still hasn't determined the origins, many question why it hadn't been first reported sooner than late 2012. Now, to further support the idea the pyramid could have been built by different civilizations, archaeologists from the Portuguese Association of Archaeological Research have recently discovered evidence on Pico Island that suggests their belief that humans existed in the Erosion region before the arrival of the Portuguese thousands of years ago. Number 3. The Mariana Trench. In the western Pacific Ocean, you will find the deepest part of the sea. The Mariana Trench is deeper than the height of Mount Everest, 43 miles wide, and a massive 1,580 miles long, which is 5 times larger than the Grand Canyon. Certified U.S. National Monument, only small areas of the Mariana Trench have been explored. James Cameron reached the bottom in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger in 2012, with the last successful attempt to search the ocean floor coming in 2020 when Chinese submersible Fenduji made it all the way down. Several new species of underwater creatures have been discovered in the Mariana Trench, with most living on the surface of the ocean floor, including a type of sea cucumber. Explorers will find themselves in total darkness as they continue to understand what else lies in the deepest parts of the ocean and how the marine life manages to survive. Now, because of its sheer size and pressure, only 4 expeditions in total have successfully descended, so will we ever know what's really down there? I don't think so. Number 2. Orca attacks. For weeks, the world has been watching with interest as a group of orcas appear to be ambushing boats off the coasts of Spain and Portugal. Now, a boat captain is speaking out, saying that after his boat was attacked for a second time, he now thinks these groups of orcas know exactly what they're doing. Captain Dan Kritz, a sailor with Reliance Yacht Management, had his first orca encounter in 2020. I was sailing with my delivery crew delivering a yacht when I was surrounded with a pack of 8 orcas, pushing the boat around for about an hour. We were one of the first boats experiencing this very unusual orca behavior. He added, first time in 2020 we could hear them communicating under the boat. This time they were quiet, it didn't take them that long to destroy both rudders. Looks like they knew exactly what they were doing, they didn't touch anything else, he added, saying it only took them about 15 minutes to dismantle parts of the boat. Now, marine scientists are still trying to determine what is causing the uptick in orca attacks on boats off the coasts of Portugal and Spain, but there's no question there's been a sizable increase in incidents over the past 2 years. Killer whale research group Atlantic Orca Working Group has found that these events have tripled, with 52 incidents in 2020 compared to more than 200 in 2022. Earlier this month, biologist and wildlife conservationist Jeff Coren told CBS that the behavior boils down to the incredible intelligence of orcas, and he believes older whales are teaching their young pod members these destructive tendencies. And honestly, good for them. We are practically barging into their house, and I think that they should keep it up. And coming in at number 1 is the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is an urban legend focused on loosely defined regions of the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean, where a number of aircrafts and ships are said to disappear under mysterious circumstances. Some speculate that unknown and mysterious forces account for the unexplained disappearances, such as extraterrestrials capturing humans for study, the influence of lost continent of the Atlantis, and vortexes that suck objects into other dimensions. For example, on December 5th, 1945, Flight 19 was lost with 14 airmen, and later that same day, PBM Mariner Bu number 59225 was lost with 13 airmen while searching for Flight 19. Or when in 1918 the USS Cyclops and the 309 people on it disappeared without a trace sometime after leaving Barbados. So far, this is the biggest loss of Navy personnel not related to combat. Things just seem to disappear with no explanation there, so will we ever know what goes on there? I don't think so, and I think we should just stay away.
While on an aerial survey off the coast of Nantucket, scientists Orla O'Brien and her colleague were on the lookout for right whales, fin whales, and humpbacks. But O'Brien spotted one whale that seemed out of place. The whale had no dorsal fin, similar to a right whale, but its skin didn't match. Now, after getting a better look, O'Brien realized she was looking at a gray whale, a species that's been extinct in the Atlantic since the 17th century. O'Brien turned to her partners saying, quote, "I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to say what I think this is out loud because I don't think you're going to believe me." The two were in complete shock. How did this whale end up in the Atlantic? Well, O'Brien figures it probably came from the Pacific population, explaining that climate change is opening up pathways that used to be blocked by ice. But O'Brien also said it's unlikely gray whales will return to the Atlantic permanently anytime soon, calling the sighting a quote, once-in-a-lifetime experience. 66 million years ago, something massive slammed into the Earth, changing the planet forever. The event left behind evidence that stayed hidden deep under the Atlantic Ocean until now. A team from Heriot-Watt University has just brought us new details about the Nadir crater, the site of the impact. Using fresh 3D seismic imaging, they've confirmed that this crater likely formed around the same time as the Chicxulub impact, which wiped out the dinosaurs. The Nadir crater itself is huge, around 9 kilometers or 5.5 miles across, and was first spotted in 2022 by Dr. Usadin Nicholson using seismic data from the ocean floor off West Africa. But the new imaging tech has really given researchers a closer look at it, showing just how much chaos this impact caused. A massive tsunami would have washed over the area with shockwaves making the ground move like a liquid. This also gives us a better idea of the size of the asteroid that caused it, which might have been way bigger than they originally thought. When it hit, it was moving at 72,000 kilometers per hour, triggering fault lines and mudslides all over. The next thing the team wants to do is drill into the crater to pull out core samples and get a better idea of what really happened. Beyond just painting a better picture of the event, the data could help us prepare for future asteroid threats because something like this could happen again. Out in the Atlantic Ocean, scientists have just found something pretty wild. A massive blob of water stretching from the tip of Brazil all the way to the Gulf of Guinea. Ocean water isn't the same everywhere. Instead, it's made up of all these interconnected layers and masses that shift and separate because of currents, eddies, and changes in temperature or salinity. So there are noticeable differences in water if you know what you're looking for. This blob, which they've named Atlantic Equatorial Water, had somehow slipped under the radar until now. Similar water masses exist in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, but researchers had never seen any in the Atlantic. Viktor Zerbis, an oceanographer from the Shurshop Institute in Moscow, said that the idea of this water mass missing in the Atlantic seemed pretty strange, saying, "It seemed controversial that the equatorial water mass is present in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, but missing in the Atlantic Ocean, because the equatorial circulation and mixing in all three oceans have common features." End quote. So how do these masses form? Basically, they're created by mixing of different water bodies. Oceanographers figure out where these masses are by studying the relationship between water temperature and salinity. Thanks to floating devices called floats, which oceanographers use to measure the ocean's temperature and salinity, they finally found one of these masses in the Atlantic. Off the coast of the mid-Atlantic ridge, scientists have discovered something of an underwater city, filled with huge rock structures, walls, columns, and monoliths, some as tall as 60 meters or about 197 feet. Now, sadly, this is not the remains of some lost civilization, but it is incredible on its own. The site was first discovered in 2000 and has since become a hotspot for marine life. It's not a city in the traditional sense, but the name stuck because of its huge, mysterious structures. years. What makes this discovery so wild is that the lost city is the longest known venting environment in the ocean. Basically, it's a place where heat and gases like hydrogen and methane are released from the seabed, supporting life in total darkness. Around 750 to 900 meters below the surface. There's no sunlight here, so creatures survive off of chemicals rather than photosynthesis. Tiny snails and microbes live in these vents, and larger animals like crabs, eels, and shrimp have also been spotted, but they're trickier to find. The lost city is a bit of a scientific wonder, but because it kind of gives us clues about how life on Earth began billions of years ago, and it might even give us clues about how life could exist on other planets. North of the Azores near Portugal, scientists recently made a strange discovery while diving deep into the Atlantic Ocean. About 1.6 miles down, they found a series of holes in the ocean floor, arranged in tracks. They found even more sets of holes about 300 miles away from the first location. The holes, spaced about 4 inches apart, were around 5 to 6 feet long. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said in a post on the website formerly known as Twitter, the origin of the holes has scientists stumped. The holes look kinda human-made, but the little piles of sediment around them suggest they were excavated by something. This isn't the first time strange holes have been found. Similar ones were discovered not far from this site almost 20 years ago, but scientists haven't found a clear explanation yet. Michael Vecchione, a deep-sea biologist with the NOAA, said in an interview with the New York Times, there was something important going on there, and we don't know what it was. Reinforced the idea there was a mystery we would figure out someday, but we haven't figured it out yet. End quote. A team of researchers recently made an incredible find when they discovered hundreds of dinosaur footprints on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Led by paleontologist Louis L. Jacobs from Southern Methodist University, they found over 260 matching sets of early Cretaceous footprints in Brazil and Cameroon. The footprints were made about 120 million years ago and show where dinosaurs were able to cross between South America and Africa before the continents split apart. The two sets of footprints are more than 3,700 miles apart, but would have originally been made on a supercontinent called Gondwana, which broke off from Pangaea about 180 million years ago. A team of marine biologists led by Cindy Gonzalez from Florida International University just recently discovered a new species of hammerhead shark in the Caribbean and Southwest Atlantic. These sharks are part of the same genus as hammerheads. The new shark, named the shovelbill, is a smaller species, only growing about 1.5 meters or 5 feet long. Of course, they got their name because they have these flat, shovel-shaped heads. You can find these sharks in coastal waters, estuaries, coral reefs, and seagrass beds from Belize to Brazil. Unfortunately though, they are at risk of extinction thanks to overfishing. These sharks are being caught in large numbers, especially in areas like Brazil, where fishing management is weaker. Scientists recently mapped the largest known deep-sea coral reef, stretching 310 miles or 500 kilometers off the US Atlantic coast. The reef was discovered thanks to new underwater mapping technology that lets researchers create 3D images of the ocean floor. The reef extends from Florida to South Carolina, and at certain points is up to 68 miles or 110 kilometers wide. To put it into perspective, it's nearly 3 times the size of Yellowstone National Park. It's much less accessible than tropical reefs like the Great Barrier Reef though, which is why it's taken so long to map. The reef is deep enough that sunlight doesn't reach it. Unlike tropical reefs where corals rely on photosynthesis, these deep-sea corals filter food particles out of water for energy. The reef is home to a whole bunch of sea creatures though: sharks, swordfish, sea stars, octopuses, and shrimp. The team is hoping that with more advances in mapping technology, even bigger deep-sea reefs might be found in the future. A recent discovery off the coast of Brazil has found that the Rio Grande Rise, a submerged plateau in the South Atlantic Ocean, was once a giant tropical island. Researchers from the University of Sao Paulo, led by Luigi Giovanni, spent nearly a decade researching this. The team used autonomous underwater vehicles and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, to map the area and gather samples. They found sediment and volcanic rocks, showing that there were signs of weathering from a warm tropical climate. Turns out the island was part of the supercontinent Gondwana before it split apart. Luigi Giovanni explained, "We discovered that the clay was formed after the last volcanic activity occurred 45 million years ago," adding that the tropical soil was similar to the red earth found in Sao Paulo. It's a cool discovery not just for the history, but also for the future. The area is full of minerals like cobalt, nickel, and lithium, which could be used for renewable energy. Back in 2023, researchers discovered a new species in the Antarctic Ocean, officially called the Antarctic strawberry feather star. It's got a cute name, but it's far from cute. Sorta looks like a jellyfish, but not the glowing, majestic ones you usually think of. Instead, it's mostly just tentacles. Again, looks a bit like an alien facehugger, and some of those tentacles have tiny claws at the ends. These creatures can grow up to 8 inches long, which might not sound huge, but 8 inches of this? No thanks. What sea creatures did we actually evolve from? Well, the story of human origins takes us back about 540 million years to a tiny, wriggling sea creature called Saccharidus. This creature was only about a millimeter in size. It lived in the sand on the ocean floor. They had a sack-like body with a large mouth, but no rear end. That means it likely had to do its number twos through its mouth. How far we've come. Saccharidus is considered one of the earliest known ancestors of all deuterostomps, a major group of animals that eventually led to creatures like fish, starfish, and eventually humans like you and me. Even though Saccharidus was very simple, it was the next step in the evolutionary tree. It had this flexible skin and some muscles, allowing it to move by wriggling through the sand. It probably ate by sucking in tiny particles or small creatures. Mudskippers are pretty fascinating if you think about how they bridge this gap between aquatic life and life here on land. They're kind of like a cross between a frog and a fish, and they've got some cool adaptations that show how life can start to make the leap from water to land. Mudskippers are an amphibious fish that can spend a lot of their time out of the water. They're found in swamps and mudflats, and they use their pectoral fins kind of like legs to walk across the mudflats. What's even more interesting is that mudskippers breathe air. They have specialized gills that can retain moisture, which allows them to absorb oxygen from the air. This allows them to live outside the water for long stretches of time. Their ability to move on land and breathe air could suggest that these things are in a sort of intermediate stage in evolution, and it's pretty cool because it kind of gives us a glimpse of what early fish might have gone through as they adapted to living on land, eventually leading to us. Mudskippers also have eyes that are adapted to both underwater and land. They haven't evolved into human-like creatures yet, but they could eventually lead to a new life form way down the line. The smooth hand fish. This is or was a species of handfish found in Australia. It was classified as extinct in 2020, but just a year later that was switched to data deficient, so there may still be a handful out there. These fish were very strange. They had a very unusual way of getting around. Instead of swimming in the traditional sense, it used its pectoral fins, like legs, to kind of walk along the sea floor. Weird, but pretty cool. They may have been moving across the ocean floor in a similar way to how early vertebrates might have moved on land. The handfish's fins evolved into broad, paddle-like shapes that helped it walk or glide, which is a big step in the direction of a more land-like movement. Unfortunately, these things may be totally extinct, but I mean, who knows what direction they could have gone in evolutionarily. Not that we'd be around to see it anyway. There's a pretty wild but fascinating hypothesis about human evolution, the aquatic ape hypothesis, the idea that some of our early ancestors might have lived in an aquatic environment, like swamps or shallow seas, instead of just on land. The basic idea is that these early humans adapted to life in water, which influenced their development, eventually leading to what we are today. One of the main points of this hypothesis is that our ancestors could have spent a lot of time wading, swimming, or diving, and that this might explain some of our more unique traits compared to other primates. For example, humans have relatively hairless skin, which could have been an adaptation for staying cool, reducing drag in the water, our ability to hold our breath, the fact that we have semi-webbed toes and hands, the way we walk upright, could have had something to do with evolving in an environment where we had to move through deeper bodies of water and, be upright. All of this could have had something to do with our possible aquatic activities way back in time. Octopuses, these are some of the most fascinating creatures in the sea. These guys not only look wild, but they're incredibly smart, and their intelligence could hint at some amazing possibilities for the very distant future. Octopuses have brains that are surprisingly complex for invertebrates, and they've shown some impressive problem-solving skills. One of the coolest things about octopuses is their ability to use tools. They can open jars, they can mimic other animals, they can create shelters out of like coconut shells. They have a level of brain power that's pretty advanced compared to most other animals. They also have incredible camouflage skills, changing color and texture to blend in with their surroundings. So with their smarts and adaptability, some scientists wonder if octopuses could potentially evolve into more complex forms in the very distant future. If they were to evolve further, who knows what kind of adaptations they might develop. They already have a level of intelligence and problem-solving ability that could, in theory, lead to even more advanced capabilities over millions of years, even eventually evolving into a more human-like species similar to our boy Kit Fisto. Of course, this would happen long after we're extinct or have left Earth and evolved into who knows what. The axolotl is one of the coolest amphibians out there. First of all, they're very cute. Some people keep them as pets. I've heard they're not great pets, but anyway, they're famous also for their ability to regenerate lost body parts like limbs, spinal cords, even parts of their heart. They completely regrow these parts without scarring. That's like an anime level power right there. And unlike most amphibians that go through a complete metamorphosis from larvae to adult form, axolotls stay in their larval state throughout their entire lives. Now, let's imagine if these things had evolved in a different direction. Their regenerative abilities might have pushed them towards developing even more sophisticated abilities, and who knows, it could in the future. For example, if they continued to live in water but evolved to have more complex limbs, they could end up with hands or forelimbs. If they'd also started spending more time outside the water, their limbs could have become more dexterous over time. They might have developed to handle life on land, becoming creatures with this blend of aquatic and terrestrial traits, maybe even evolving into something with a mix of human-like and aquatic characteristics. The Pachycetus. This was a prehistoric creature that eventually evolved into a much more intelligent, advanced animal. It could have evolved into a creature almost like us, potentially, but it ended up going in a different direction. Whales. These are obviously a highly intelligent animal. They're excellent communicators with high levels of emotional and social intelligence. They obviously live underwater, but their origins can actually be traced to an amphibious creature called the Pachycetus. These things lived around 50 million years ago, and they're one of the earliest known ancestors of modern whales. But my God, you'd never know it looking at one, or a depiction of one. Obviously, they're long gone now, but we do have bones. Pachycetus looked almost like large rats and probably spent a good chunk of their time on land. But they also had features that eventually evolved into a life completely underwater. For starters, their ear structure was similar to modern whales. Over millions of years, Pachycetus descendants gradually adapted to a more fully aquatic lifestyle. Their bodies became more streamlined. Their limbs evolved into flippers. They transitioned from walking on land to swimming efficiently in the ocean, which eventually led to the beautiful, majestic whales that we have today. Teenage Mutant Ninja Sea Turtles. Sea turtles have been around for over 1 million years, and their long evolutionary history shows just how adaptable and resilient these guys are. They have a unique body with that protective shell. They're capable of long migrations across the ocean, long limbs adapted for swimming, and a highly developed sense of direction for their migrations. Their ability to navigate long distances shows a very high level of environmental awareness. If sea turtles were to evolve further, their flippers might gradually adapt into more functional limbs capable of holding objects, like katanas or nunchucks. Over time, this could result in a semi-aquatic species with a combination of turtle and human traits. They could even learn martial arts, fight crime, eat pizza instead of algae and seaweed. I should turn this into a cartoon. Dolphins are already some of the most intelligent marine animals. They have complex social behaviors, communication skills, problem-solving abilities. Their high intelligence makes it pretty easy to imagine them evolving into a more human-like form. I mean, dolphins even use tools like marine sponges to protect their snouts while they forage on the seafloor. If dolphins continued to evolve, their intelligence could possibly lead to more advanced cognitive functions. Over millions of years, their flippers might evolve to become more versatile, their social behaviors could get even more complex, maybe even leading to sophisticated forms of communication and perhaps even a culture. Alright, mermaids. The idea of mermaids has been around for centuries, with sightings reported by sailors and explorers from different cultures all over the world. These stories often describe mermaids as having a human upper body and a fish-like lower half. Now, some accounts are pretty detailed, claiming that mermaids live in these elaborate underwater cities or have their own unique cultures. From a cryptozoology viewpoint, one theory is that mermaids could actually be a type of undiscovered primate or marine mammal, and not just something in lore and myth. Reports of mermaid sightings are a lot less frequent than they were back in the day, but there are those rare cases where people claim to have spotted some sort of mermaid-like creature, only they're not usually described looking like Ariel. They're said to be much freakier looking than the Disney depiction. Sure, it's most likely that these early sailors mistook a creature like a manatee or a dugong, both of which have kind of like almost human-like features when you see them from a distance and you're just this desperate sailor who hasn't seen a woman in God knows how long. But who knows? I mean, another possibility is that mermaids could be a form of undiscovered species. If creatures like that existed, they'd be living in remote or deep sea environments where it's hard for scientists to fully explore thoroughly.